Dear employees. Wait. I need to say this. This pack is not going to take you 5,000 hours to complete. It's more like 1,500 to 2,000 hours. I just have to get that out of the way. Now let's get started. Dear employees, the training manual is now complete. You are now expected to know every last detail of your training. Let's do one final review together, and I will comment on the various points of the material covered in the manual. You start off with nothing, as usual, punching down a tree. Then you go mining. Soon enough, you have steam-powered machines, then electric machines, and then multi-block machines, which are more powerful. As you progress, the machines get more complex, requiring automation challenges or stronger infrastructure to run. You have chemical processing lines for platinum group metals, lanthanides, and even fictional materials like naquata. Further on, you get more and more into the science fiction realm. The four-dimensional transcendent metal, tachyon-rich temporal fluid that goes backwards in time, quark-gluon plasma at far too low of a temperature, magnetic monopole matter. You can even hold molten space-time itself. Early on, you have realistic things like an ore washing plant, an industrial centrifuge, assembly lines, solar towers, and so on, but later on, just look at this. A particle accelerator and synchrotron that uses Larmor radiation to engrave wafers, a space elevator to mine asteroids and pump fluid from other planets, a stabilized black hole that utilizes the warped space-time around it to compress items, the Forge of the Gods, harnessing a neutron star to melt items, and the Eye of Harmony, allowing you to simulate other solar systems. Feeling a bit overwhelmed? Don't worry, the progression is gradual and well-paced for the most part. For the majority of the game, there is lots of varied progression to work on. If you get bored of doing tech, you can do some magic. If you get bored of that, you can work on breeding some bees. There's a lot to do, and the questbook guides you through almost all of it. GTNH has one of the best questbooks out there. With nearly 50 quest chapters and hundreds if not thousands of quests, GTNH will guide you every step of the way. Almost. The magic chapters are, in my opinion, not extensive enough to cover the extremely broad range of magic content, but besides that, there are also some quests for things that you're realistically never going to use. Regardless, the quests that are in the book are generally very high quality and help you set short-term goals quite well. If the questbook doesn't explain a mechanic to you, typically the tooltips of the machines will. I never felt lost at any point in my entire playthrough, and always had a clearly defined next goal. I will cover some of the major aspects of GTNH: tech, magic, bees, and a final review. Let's talk about each of them. Easily and by far the strongest part of this mod pack. Progressing tech in this mod pack is some of the most engaging and rewarding gameplay in any Minecraft mod pack, and I would even say in the entire factory building genre. Unsurprisingly, tech in GTNH consists primarily of GregTech. You will dabble in some other tech mods like Ender.io and Industrial Craft 2 as well, but it's mostly GregTech. The early game can feel a bit tedious if you don't know what to expect, so expect to spend a long time searching for ores by digging, struggling to find the one ore vein you need, and manually crafting plates, wires, cables, and circuits, and so on. In 2.8, which is the current version of GTNH, there is a form of auto-crafting built into NEI, which alleviates this grind significantly. Always craft items in batches and don't try to be resource efficient, except for very rare materials, of course. Resources in GTNH are basically limitless, and running out of, copper is not the end of the world. It's better to be resource inefficient to save time, since you can always go mine more copper later on, and that typically ends up being faster anyway. This is a mindset I picked up on rather late in the pack, and is something I would do differently. After you make some titanium, you can make an applied energistic system, and after visiting the moon, you can move to a personal dimension, a customizable dimension where you can set it to be daytime at all times and turn off mob spawns. I never use the personal dimension, but many players do. This is when the mid-game of GTNH begins. Expect to spend the majority of your active playtime in this regime, where you will be automating your machines, upgrading to multi-blocks, setting up extensive processing lines, solving automation challenges, and generally unlocking new and interesting mechanics. In the late game of GTNH, which I would say is after you make your first space elevator, some cracks in the game start to show. While this stage of the game is still a lot of fun, it is clear that it needs more work. Progression is fairly linear from around UEV. In this stage of the game, you will spend a lot of your time scaling your existing infrastructure, and this is an enjoyable task for the most part, but it gets tedious after a while. In 2.8 and beyond, you have access to a matter manipulator, which is an item that allows you to copy and paste a volume of space, including configurations. In the version of GTNH that I played, this didn't exist, but that would make infrastructure scaling so much easier. Finally, the end game of GTNH, the Eye of Harmony and beyond. I think I'm a very patient player, and I don't mind AFKing a lot, but the Eye of Harmony was the first time I felt that my time was just not being respected. The Eye of Harmony has 9 tiers, but honestly, it should have just been 3. Each tiered block is basically a copy of the previous one. The recipe basically has the same inputs, but more of them, which is not really very interesting. The blocks have unnecessarily long crafting times and are crafted in an advanced assembly line typically, which is a multi-block that has horrible scaling. It's great in the beginning when you first unlock it, but in the endgame, when you need a lot of them, they have an upper limit to their crafting speed, so they're not great. They're also very performance and power hungry. The Eye of Harmony and advanced assembly lines need some serious work to bring them to a good state. Besides that though, it's a blast. Oh yeah, magic. Lock in, employees, I'm about to roast the warp out of Thaumcraft. There are 4 main magic mods: Botania, Blood Magic, Witchery, and Thaumcraft. Yeah, Botania's a tech mod, very funny. Let's start with Witchery. I don't really know much about this mod, to be honest. I barely engaged with it at all, but it seems kinda cool. It does seem like to me that it would be horrible to have to mass produce items from Witchery at an endgame scale, but luckily you never need to do that. I don't really know much else about it. Next, Botania. There are some important differences between Botania in GTNH 2.7 and in 2.8 and beyond, so take my review here with a grain of salt. I think it's annoying to automate things with jank. Throwing items onto crafting blocks just feels gross. Having to use world accelerators to speed things up instead of there being a better scaling option also feels kinda gross. All in all, I didn't hate it, but I didn't really like it either. The main reward for completing Botania is the Ring of Loki, which made it all worth it. But in 2.8 and beyond, where the matter manipulator exists, I don't know if the Ring of Loki has a place in my heart anymore. My favorite of the magic mods, not that that's saying much, is Blood Magic. The entirety of Blood Magic before you unlock the Well of Suffering ritual is a horrible experience. However, after you get the Well of Suffering, you can use a GregTech machine to provide blood, or life essence. The Extreme Entity Crusher has a ritual mode, and this integration of GregTech with Blood Magic is awesome. Still, the Well of Suffering is sort of late into Blood Magic, and you do need to suffer to get to the Well of Suffering. Regardless, Blood Magic meteors are absolutely worth the grind. You get access to so many materials that would otherwise be difficult or annoying to source in large quantities. And finally, the big one, Thaumcraft. I'm gonna get so much heat from all the magic enjoyers, but at the end of the day, this was my experience with how Thaumcraft is in this pack. Every other magic mod depends on Thaumcraft. I will say though, it's entirely possible, and even likely, that I approached Thaumcraft poorly. Maybe it's just me, but I think the Thaumcraft experience is bad. And that results in me not wanting to engage with the mod, which makes my experience even worse. I found that trying to solve Thaumcraft by myself was a pain, because the information you need is just hard to find. If you think I should have read through the entire Thaumonomicon for all the possibilities, I don't know, maybe I should have, but I find that Thaumonomicon entries are often intentionally vague and poorly written to add to the mystique of the mod, which is cool in isolation, but in the context of GTNH, where nearly every complex multi has a clearly written tooltip explaining itself, I don't think it should be so vague. Anyway, some more issues. First of all, research. The research completer exists, which is good, but I think there are far too many research items. Many things could just be combined into one research, instead of having to research what's essentially the same thing with a different texture a dozen times. Also, warp is a nuisance that adds nothing to the game. Automation of Thaumcraft crafting. Almost all of them require some level of jank, or are unreliable, or are severely limited in scalability, or are so esoteric that I don't even know what they are. I know some folks enjoy battling the jank, and that's valid, but I think unreliability is actively unfun. The biggest offender of all is infusion. Infusion is, in my opinion, the most annoying mechanic in the entire pack, and at this point I would even be happy with something as lame and boring as a 3x3x3 badly textured cube that takes inputs and spits out outputs at the cost of energy. Let me break down my problems with infusion. First, infusion is unlocked around HV. Want to know how you do infusions at the end of the game? With the same setup, with the exact same mechanics. Second, automating the insertion of items into pedestals is no problem. It's exactly the same automation as a GregTech assembly line, so that's good. But infusion requires you to right-click the main block with a wand. This can be automated with an infusion claw, but guess what? It adds to your infusion's instability. And speaking of instability, I've had weird, strange inconsistencies with instability. I've had infusions randomly fail even when I have vastly more stability than what's required, and I still cannot figure out why. It got to the point where I just gave up and just did all infusions by hand with backups and supervision. The silver lining of Thaumcraft is the Arcane Assembler. This is the one exception here. They are the only form of automated Thaumcraft crafting that is reliable and just works, but they're kind of simple and uninteresting. But I think it's better simple and boring than janky and broken. I know, I like to meme on bees here and there, but it's all jokes. Bees are cool. Bees, from forestry, are a resource generation method in GTNH. You can use bees to generate low-level resources such as copper, iron, and so on, but more importantly, there are bees that boost the output of processing lines. For example, the indium bee cannot get you indium directly, but you can add it to an existing indium processing line to multiply the outputs. That's cool. However, there is one type of bee I kind of mildly dislike. It's the ones that allow you to skip processing chains entirely. One example is the Kevlar bee, which gives you Kevlar nuggets directly, allowing you to bypass an entire processing line. The Kevlar line is admittedly pretty long and uninteresting processing line, but skipping it entirely seems a bit broken. Besides that, to be honest, I'm not very knowledgeable about bees, since I decided to forego the vast majority of them. I wanted to have my playthrough be as varied as possible, and I'm glad I did. Using planetary gas siphons on a space station at Neptune to source my xenon is, I think, a bit more interesting than making a bee that just spits out xenon. I'm sure a lot of effort goes into making that bee, but from my understanding, the general process of breeding a new bee species is basically the same from the first bee to the last, and that seems kind of boring to me. Bees are very, very popular in the community though, and I am interested in engaging with them on any more future GTNH runs. At this point, employees may still be wondering, is GTNH the pack for me? Am I right to doubt my Lord CEO's opinion about the various topics covered in this video? When can I go home from the office and see my family again? I cannot answer any of those questions, my humble employees. If you want to try GTNH, go into it knowing that it is unlike any other Minecraft mod pack out there. Expect to spend a long time in the pack. This is not a pack you can beat in a 2-week Minecraft phase. This is absolutely a marathon of a mod pack. In a good way. It took me nearly 4,000 hours and who knows how much server uptime. I did spend a lot of time faffing about and building and making things look nice, so your expected completion time is likely much lower than mine. I will say though, every upgrade feels good in this game. I would play it all over again, and I probably will. Well, I already am, with threefold and random potato on 3 TP, but I mean I would do another solo run again at some point in the future. The only things holding this pack back from a perfect score in my eyes are the poor magic integration and the time-wasting endgame. Though I suppose the insane endgame is part of the infamy of GTNH. My final rating is a 9.6 out of 10. I expect you all to now finish your training and get back to work. Regards, HamCorp CEO.